All right, there we are. We're live, I think.
We are live. Great. Yeah. Good to see you.
Good to see
And
you. Yeah.
I'm not in my normal place, which is always interesting to, like, how does it feel to be somewhere else, you know?
Yeah, you've been somewhere else for a long time.
It's true. The last few months, it's been a
Yeah,
little
you've been
crazy.
one place and another place and a
Um,
third place.
yeah. And the schedule coming up isn't going to help that. But,
Mhm.
you know, eventually I'll settle down. I feel like kind of a wandering monk, you know?
Yes, a Ronin.
Yeah.
Yep.
A mendicant.
Yep.
Anyway, I guess we should do an official start, right?
Or we could just keep going the way we're going.
We can
Whatever.
just keep going. Well, here we are.
Here we are.
And
Great to see you again. It's been a while. Yeah, you've been on retreat.
yeah. I was on. I got back from India, and then I think we did one recording when I got back from India.
I think so.
And
Yeah.
then I left for 4 weeks on
Yeah.
a really beautiful and powerful silent retreat with my teachers, Kitasaro and Tinasura.
Great.
2 former monastics and just phenomenal teachers. And it was great to be with them and a very powerful group of practitioners. And it took place at the Big Bear Retreat Center, which I'd never been to. It's in Big Bear, California, just like a couple hours west of LA in the mountains. And
must have been beautiful.
It was beautiful. We arrived in a blizzard. At the end of a blizzard, there was 2.5 feet of snow on the ground. By the time we left, it was really beautifully. All the snow was gone, and it was up on the mountains, but and it was beautiful weather. 7,000 feet, so it took a while to adapt to the altitude. But I'm kind of used to that, teaching in the Rockies, as I will next month. But yeah, it took a few days to just adapt. Altitude is a funny thing, the older you get, the harder it is, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been up to high altitude in a long time. When I was in, I think it was high school, I had a trip to Peru and Bolivia, and it gets really high up there. And I had, I've forgotten what it's called, the sort of altitude sickness. I mean, it wasn't bad, but it's just a headache and oh my gosh, and you feel kind of awful. But
you don't know what's wrong until you realize, it's the altitude.
Yeah, you're just not getting as much oxygen. Yeah.
The older you get, the harder it gets.
I'm sure. Yeah.
And it also impacts sleep. But I don't sleep well on retreats generally. And my sleeping on retreats is quite fitful or episodic. It's interesting, but it's not, because you're meditating most of the day. So it's like you're not, and you go to bed early and you wake up early. So it's like, anyway. So our theme today is Shraddha, faith, confidence, which I think is an important aspect of practice personally. And sometimes I lose it. And then sometimes it's like, oh, right. This is important. And as I was saying earlier to you, that the reason I wanted to talk about it was really because of some stuff that happened on the retreat, and being with 2 teachers who themselves were former monastics in the Thai forest tradition with Ajahn Chah. That reinvigorated my faith in the teachings, and my faith in meditating, and my faith in bringing these practices really into the world, into life, however we live it. So it's, I think it's something that we don't think about, because that word, faith, has a certain connotation for some people, based on their own religious background. And so, confidence is a good replacement for that. Although to me, it doesn't, at this point anyway, at least as I am right now, it doesn't quite hold the same weight, which is interesting. Yes, I have confidence in the teachings. Absolutely. I have confidence in, my own practice. Faith seems a little deeper. It seems like yes. It's like the other way it unfolds for me often is in compassion and loving kindness practices, right? Because we are doing something, we are radiating something outward, and we have no idea if anything happens, right? If that has an impact, but I have faith that it does. I just don't know what it does, right? I don't know how it works, but I have a feeling it does work, and I want to have faith in that. That something is going on, whether I'm doing Tonglen or just radiating loving kindness as the teaching speaks of, above and beyond and all around, and it's like, oh, well, what is that? What's really happening? Is anything happening?
Right. I
So
mean, to me,
yeah,
it's
this
just
is
for yourself. I mean, to me, it's for your own mind, your own to
sure.
purify your own mind stream, as it were, and then through that purification, you're bringing out that sentiment into your interactions with the
Oh,
world, and
absolutely.
that
Yeah.
brings it out. To me, at least, that's how I would understand it.
Yeah. Yeah. Although it's so interesting how the sutra is written, right? It's like you have the conch shell on the mountain, and it's like
Yep.
blasting it out, and um, so yeah, of course. I mean, that's sharing the merit and how we bring our practice into the world. But as our practice deepens and the understanding and realization of anatta, starts to kind of settle and become part of who this manifestation is at this moment, then everything else kind of shifts around, or has the potential to shift around. And so it's not about me or my mind, it's about mind, and has a much, the boundlessness of it. So yeah, and so the question is where, I guess, when our faith or confidence weakens for whatever reason, are we aware of it, and how do we work with that? So it also becomes a kind of mindfulness aspect of mindfulness. Of course, it's like, oh, well, I don't really need to practice today, right? I don't need to meditate today, and then that leads to another day. I don't really, it's like when we fall off the meditation wagon, as it were, if we do, why? What's going on in those moments, and what does it take to kind of reinvigorate? Is
Yeah,
it
I
just
think.
hearing the right teacher or hearing the right teaching? And
Yeah, and I mean, it certainly helps to, I think, try to spend time celebrating little victories. I mean,
Mhm.
that I think a lot of us tend to be, how do I say, a little bit, we don't want to celebrate them because we think they're too premature. We think, oh, I don't want to puff up my own ego. I don't want to pretend that I have an advancement along the path that I don't have, yada 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 yada. And so therefore I'm not gonna make a big thing out of this small whatever it is.
Right.
But I mean, the Buddha certainly in the early texts, I mean, often recommends celebrating, whether it's an ethical, something that you did that was good for other people, which is part of the path. I mean, it's
Sure.
not like that's separate. It's not like, meditation is the path and doing nice things is not. I mean, they're both the path. So, being a good person, living a good life. If something happens in meditation where you notice something and something clicks and something shifts, like you say, um, I think, making that part of your practice to keep that in front of your mind, I think can help. To me, at least, helps confidence is to
Yeah.
just make myself aware and be happy about these and make the practice as much as we can to make it a happy, a positive kind of thing, right? Because then I think
beautiful.
that makes it more easy to be confident about, and have a good feeling about what we're doing, rather than trying to frame it in some other way as a penance or as a trial or something like that, where
Right.
really we just want to give it up, because who
Yeah.
wants that,
Yeah. It's actually, so what I'm hearing is beautiful, and is also it when you say it that way, or when you put it in that context, it's like an antidote to doubt,
Oh yeah.
you
Mm-hmm.
know, and because doubt is one of the things that really kind of can mess us up in terms of our practice. I mean, even though doubt as a hindrance, not doubt as in terms of questioning. That's another
Right.
matter.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of a hindrance, when we're confronted with doubt, it's like and it's often because we're looking for something. We're looking where we have an expectation of how it should be versus how it is, and so really taking delight in however it is, just taking delight in the fact that you're aware of how it is,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to, or there's an awareness of how it is,
Mm-hmm.
is important. Now, I will also say that a big part of this retreat and the beauty of working with these particular teachers is that they are also very very much involved. They integrate into their practice a lot of the Chan traditions, primarily around Kuan Yin, the Bodhisattva Kuan Yin, Avalokiteshvara,
Of compassion.
and part of that is quite devotional and even ritualized in various. One particular ceremony that is done, which is a great compassion ceremony, and those kind of rituals and devotion can really strengthen one's faith. Actually, it has potential. At least it did for me in this particular retreat. I'd done this ceremony many times before, but because of my state of mind, I guess, and where I was in the particular evolution of this retreat, there was something that really struck me in this ceremony, and almost it was like retaking vows, and like having confidence that I will actually hold to those vows, ethical vows primarily, and so that's another way it can find its way into one's practice, I think, is through devotional practice. It's like, and again, this is what can really, I suppose, for some people, turn them off, because they came from a very devotional religious background. And so one has to kind of, I didn't, so it wasn't like I was, when I first started, it felt foreign, but it hasn't felt foreign in a long time. I don't necessarily keep it up when I'm not with a group doing it, but there is something that happens in that context with a group, all chanting, and bowing when you're supposed to bow, and all of that. There is something really powerful in that.
In that togetherness, probably as much as
in
anything.
The togetherness, the strength in that, and that adds to my. It certainly added to my faith in these practices. We'll see how it is carrying, as I carry it forward into my teaching and my life. So, yeah, I think that I think it's one of those things that, when you first start learning about the Four Noble Truths, when you first start learning the Eightfold, really starting to look at the Eightfold Path, what is it that gives you confidence? What happens along the way that strengthens that confidence? And as you were saying, if we recognize little shifts in the way we are. That certainly is one factor in there. And hopefully finding a teacher that can, who knows you well enough to know, that, oh yeah, there's been a shift, or friends, what's
Yeah.
shifted. That makes a huge difference. So just kind of recognizing those moments where, I had an example yesterday. This was really sweet, and this was more not about me. I could have taken it about me, but it really wasn't. There was I have a daily sangha, and people join that. Even though it started during COVID, it's continued to be strong, and people are continually joining it, including some of our listeners. And there was a woman that joined a few weeks ago whose name was familiar. And when she was there yesterday, we had our newcomers welcome, and she said, "Oh yeah, I took an MBSR class, or it was kind of an MBSR class with you, and it was like 15 years ago." Like one of my really early on in my own life as an MBSR teacher. And she said, "Yeah, it changed my life. Really, I haven't necessarily been able to keep up the practices regularly, but." She was working at a hospital at the time, and as a social worker, and she said, "Yeah, I was so glad to discover that this, is here, and I can just join anytime." And there was something like, wow, that happens, And I have to remind myself of that. It's like, oh yeah, I started these practices at this point 30 years ago, and I met a teacher, and he had a huge influence on me. And this is what happens on retreat. You sort of recollect a lot of things. And then you're with teachers who know you well, and they instill confidence, and you watch them, and how they practice, and the stories they tell, and the way they relate to the teachings. These are all things that give confidence and faith. So.
No, I think it's a very interesting place of inquiry.
Yeah.
For myself, of course, coming from a more a secular background, faith has always been something of an issue for me, because I tend to associate faith with the more Christian sort of theistic kind of. Well, it's not entirely. But for some, it is a sort of what you call blind faith.
Sure.
That is faith in the absence of evidence, and that to me is so dangerous because it can lead to so many different outcomes. And if you get hooked on a kind of a blind faith, there's a sense that you can take any road, and it can lead you anywhere, and it can lead you some very bad places. So for myself, when I come to the word faith, I like to interpret it more along the lines of confidence, in the sense of it's not blind. There's an element of wanting some outside verification that what you're doing is good, and that's why I sort of rely on, as I say, good, memories of good things that have happened to me because of my practice. And in the early teachings, faith was there. It does not appear in the Eightfold Path. It doesn't appear in the Seven Factors of Awakening. It doesn't appear in the threefold training of ethics, meditation, and wisdom. So and the Buddha did distinguish between faith followers and wisdom followers.
Right.
And there is always, I think, the underlying feeling in the early texts that the wisdom followers is something a little better, although they end at the same place, really. So it doesn't really matter that much. There's also a very, a good famous sutta where there is one of the followers of the Buddha goes to Nigantanataputta, the head of the Jains, and the head of the Jains, believes that he's fixed this guy because the guy says that he doesn't have faith in the Buddha's teaching on meditation, on deep states of meditation, and that Nigantha Nataputa says, there you go, you don't have faith in the Buddha, and here you are, a follower of his. And he says, well, what is the which is better, faith or knowledge? And he says, I have knowledge in the Buddha because I don't need to have faith, because I know, because I see for myself. I've done the training. I've done
and that's part of the
practice.
teaching. Yeah,
and that's part of the teaching. And so I don't need the faith because I have the knowledge. And that's how, I tend to come to faith, as that it's something that you have, that's best to have through confidence, through a direct seeing, in the small way that us, beginners can have.
Right.
And of course, it's good to have sort of a broader confidence in the work that you're doing, because it's a big path and all the rest. But for as far as the big ending things, like coming to a complete enlightenment, perfect enlightenment, I don't know. I all I can see is the little bit in front of me that I have some confidence in. And the longer path, I let that take care of itself, because I can't see it. I can't see the end. I see the next step.
Right. Although you know that the end is possible. That there's,
I hope it's possible.
But absolutely, no, this is not blind faith we're talking about. No way. And it there is a certain letting go, however, of old habits, of old, there's a certain discomfort at first, perhaps, in taking on some of these teachings and giving them an opportunity.
Giving them opportunity, yeah.
So it's like, okay, let me see what it's like to live, in this way.
Yeah.
And that's really part of the teaching is, try for yourself, as he said,
Yeah.
And
investigate, be curious about it. I think that's where it begins, is a kind of a curiosity. For instance, you were talking about metta. There's an example. I think you yourself said that when you first started metta, it was a little weird. And for me too. When I first started metta practice, it was a little weird. And I felt like, what is this? But I had enough confidence in the general path to say, look, I'll give it a try. And if I don't like it, I'll do something else. Fine. I never felt any pressure. No one pressed me to do it. Yeah. And I found it was very useful. And so that's, there you go.
Yeah. And it's interesting, I've not been on one of the Vipassana trainings, the Goenka trainings, where you sort of have to commit to doing what they tell you to do, right? Which doesn't leave a whole lot of room for questioning. The questioning usually happens later, from what I've experienced through people who've been on those retreats that have then come to various classes. It's like, well, wait a minute. I know there's more to it than this. Same with an MBSR class. When we teach mindfulness-based stress reduction, there's no outright Dharma taught, although it's all there. But then there's like, oh, well, this has had an impact, and I know there's something more. So let me look, right? And that makes it so. However we start down this path, there will be a moment where it's like, well, wait a minute. There's something else here, and am I going to look for it or not? Am I going to investigate or not? Or am I just going to stay where I am?
Well, if you're in the right place for it, because not everyone's in the right place for it.
Of course, yeah. Or you'll know when you're ready. It's like the teacher will appear when the student is ready. So I think from a place of investigation and mindfulness, it's just worth kind of saying, well, wait a minute, what gives me faith in this practice?
Mm.
And when it's waning, why is it waning?
Mm-hmm.
What's going on?
Yeah.
Without, and then of course our challenge, of course, is to do that without judging whether it's good or bad. It's just, this is what's here now.
Yeah.
And of course we're going to have ebbs and flows, and
Well, and also, I mean, just as I say that some people are in the wrong place for it. I think I mean, we should always be open to the possibility that maybe at some point in our lives we're going to be in the wrong place for it, or maybe we're with a group that's really not right for us, and
oh yeah,
and
for
and
sure. Or
we're
a
with a
teacher.
group,
Yeah.
with a teacher, and we're getting a certain amount of pressure from them to do it their way, and we just don't feel the confidence, we don't feel the faith, and it's important, I think, not in that situation, not to blame ourselves and think there's something wrong with me here. I have to overcome this and have this blind faith in this person that I don't really seem to follow. I think it's important in that to be open to the possibility that, okay, this group isn't right for me, so maybe I should look for another group. Maybe I should step back from this, take some time by myself, maybe look at other groups, see who other people are teaching, and maybe I'll find somebody else, as happened to me. I mean, in other words, I've been to a number of groups, and some of them just
Sure.
don't click with me, and it's fine. There's
Yeah,
nothing
yeah.
wrong with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think we have to be open to that kind of doubt, which is, I think, a healthy doubt, which is telling us this isn't quite right at this point in our lives. Maybe some other time in our lives it would be, but right now it's not hitting the right place. So then
Yeah.
you go look for somebody, and you'll find somebody. If you look around, you'll probably find somebody who's right. If you're open-minded and look enough places, eventually you'll find something that clicks.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So keep at it.
Yeah,
Keep
keep at
looking.
it. Yeah.
Keep practicing. And speaking of retreats, I'm going to plug a retreat that I'm leading in Colorado.
Sure.
At the Rocky Mountain Echo Dharma Retreat Center, which in this instance was inspired. I've taught here a lot. This is the fifth time I've taught at this particular center. It was inspired through the Ken Burns documentary on Da Vinci.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Yeah. And it's called The Nature of Peace, Re-Enchanting Our Hearts. And whoops, I just noticed a typo. I use a quote by the nature. This is a Da Vinci quote. Nature is the source of all true knowledge. She has her own logic, her own laws. She has no effect without cause, nor invention without necessity. And there was something about that quote that really struck me.
Lovely. Yeah, lovely quote. Yeah.
And so when I do these retreats here, they're almost all outside. So we're really walking and sitting and walking and sitting, but we're doing it outside. And in this case, we'll be kind of exploring this logic of nature, and how it relates to Dharma and how it relates to us as our own nature. So yeah, it's going to be, anyway, you can check it out on my website. We'll put a link in for that. But it's the second week of June, which is a really beautiful time to be there, because it's been a pretty active spring. So anyway, that's the plan.
Good.
I'll also be in Cleveland doing some teaching in 2 weeks. So you can check with Insight Cleveland about that. And yeah. And I'm on my way to Indiana this afternoon to
busy
lead a retreat there. Yeah. So the flatlands of Indiana.
And you'll probably be needing some coffee along the way, I would think.
Oh yeah, coffee. Yes, I have to remember to bring our coffee. Yes.
Without coffee, you would
coffee
be asleep.
is important to our support.
Yes.
So you can support this podcast through Buy Me a Coffee, which you can find on the Dig in the Dharma website.
Link there.
Yeah.
And even subscribe. I mean, we've been a little bit slow this year because of different travels from me and from John, but hopefully we'll be able to nail it down.
We'll get back on schedule soon. On a regular schedule for sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah. All right, friends. Until then, keep digging the Dharma.
Back, yeah, keep digging the Dharma, and great to have you back.
I'll see you in a couple of weeks, Doug. I won't be able to do this next week because of the retreat.
Yeah, at the retreat.
But after that, yeah. Oh. All right. Take care, friends.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot.